You'll find a link in the description for this movie for an exercise file, or if you're one of my students, you'll find it in amongst your course notes. There's a link to download the file you need. File, open, and we're going to open the file. The file is called Tools and Commands in Detail. So find wherever you stored it and open that file. And I'm not going to save my changes to my other file. So this file is created in ArchiCAD 22, and it's really to help you understand the way that ArchiCAD deals with tools and commands in detail. So for example, the first exercise is about using the arrow tool. This is the tool we use for selecting things. So we can click on a single object, we can shift and click on multiple objects, we can also drag our marquee around objects to select them. And that will select the first object. There's no pre-highlighting of objects that are going to be selected. We have different selection methods. In this first method, we only have to touch an object for it to become selected, which is quite nice, but also, in this case, I might be selecting things that I don't want. In this mode, it selects objects that are totally enclosed. So if I click and drag my marquee, I have to totally enclose those objects in order to select them. The third mode works a combination of both of those. So if I click from this side, it only selects objects that are totally enclosed. If I drag the other way, any object I touch gets selected. So this works one way and this works a different way. And remember, click away from objects to deselect them. When you finish that exercise, go to your view map. Here it is here, our view map. Just have a look there and double click on the pan exercise. So how do we pan? We click our middle mouse wheel button, we move our view, and after panning you'll see there's actually an object there which you couldn't see previously. Double click on pan to restore the view. When you finish that exercise, double click on zoom, exercise number 3. So there's some text just in here. If you scroll with your mouse wheel, you'll notice that you can zoom in, but also notice that my mouse wheel was directly over that text. Where you place your cursor is really important. So if I move my cursor over here and I start rolling my mouse wheel, you can see that I'm zooming into that area and not the rectangle. So it's really important that you recognize that where you put your mouse is important, because as you scroll, you'll scroll towards your cursor. When you finish that exercise, double click on Intro to Lines. So there are times where you'll be using your line tool to create lines. Here's our line tool. I just wanted you to realize that this line has been created by clicking at this location here and coming out 0 degrees. So this line here is going across at 0 degrees. This line here is going up at 45 degrees, and this line here was drawn going down, minus 45 degrees. So it's important to understand that when we create objects and we move them, that's moving at 0 degrees, 90 degrees goes straight up, minus 90 goes down, and 180 goes across. When you finish that exercise, double click on the lines to a point, again on your view map. So here I'd like you to create lines that follow round. So I've given you points here to draw to, and I've named them P1, P2, P3, and so on. I'd like you to get your line tool. Before you start drawing, I'd like you to click here, and I'd like you to change to lines to a point. So change your layer to lines to a point. That way when we click, we can draw. You'll notice the cursor changes shape, turns to a little tick. You'll also notice I've got a pencil on the end of my cursor. When I move near that cross, the pencil fills in. So click to start, click to finish, click to start, click to finish. So what happens with ArchiCAD is that a line starts by a click and it finishes with a click. You then need to click again to start the next line. It's not a continuous object. That's a different tool. When you finish that exercise, let's go to lines to a length. Double click on that. And we need to change our layer up here and change that to lines to a length. So in this case, I want you to start learning how to draw to a specific length. Click to start. We're going to go across 3500, 3500 millimeters. My file is set up to be in millimeters. Tab, hit 0 for the enter key, enter once, and it creates that line. Let's click to start again. So click there, we're going to come down, we're going to go 1500 millimeters, and we're going to come down 90 degrees. So notice it's going downwards 90. We could also be going up 90. So just be careful of your direction. Enter once. Click once to start. This time we're going to go 3500 again. So 3500 millimeters, 3.5 meters, which is about 12 feet. There's my angle, 180 degrees. Enter once and it finishes. Click to start. Now I know it's tempting to just come up here and click. I'm just trying to get you to practice drawing to a length. So 1500 millimeters again, tab, 90 degrees, enter, and it finishes for you. When you finish that exercise, go to your view map and double click on lines to an angle. Don't forget to change your layer to lines to an angle, otherwise you will get a dialog box telling you you've got the wrong thing. So let me just show you what's going on. So if I click to start, it says here that a layer named lines to a length is hidden. So what you need to do is to choose a layer, and just down the bottom here, I want you to choose the one with the eyeball, lines to an angle. Okay. So what we want to do now is hit the tab key once, hit the tab key again, 32 degrees, hit the tab key, and you'll notice it fixes it to 32 degrees, but it's also fixed the length, so be careful of that. Here we might need to type a length in for that, and when you hit the enter key it finishes. So let's just undo that, which is a keyboard shortcut, undo. There's also a button here so you can undo that. So let's click that to start. Let's move up to this point here. Tab, 32 degrees, enter once, and it fixes that line at 32 degrees. When you finish that exercise, let's go to our rectangles. So here's a picture of the tool I want you to use. I want you to use the fill tool for this. So we're going to go to our fill tool, and I'd like you to set this to number 8, rectangles. So there is more than one way to create a rectangle. Now in this particular tool, we've got our modes at the top here, or our geometry methods. So we can do a polygon object, we can do a rectangle method, and we can do a rectangle rotated. I'd like you to use the second geometry method. So click at P1, click at P2, and it creates a fill. If we change to our third geometry method, this is our rotated rectangle, we click at P1, click at P2, and then come out towards P3 and click again. So it's a rotated rectangle. When you finish that exercise, go to your view map and double click on rectangles by data. Now in this case we want to type in the data that we want. So just before we click, don't forget, change to rectangles by data, and also change back to the second geometry method. So click to start, come down, we want to come across 3.5 meters, tab key, we want to come down 1500 millimeters. Enter once, and it creates your fill. So you don't have to double hit the enter key, hitting it once will fill that object and finish it. When you finish that exercise, we need to go to our view map and choose circles and arcs. We're going to use our circle and arc tool. Here it is here. So just remember, I've given you a picture of the tool that I want you to use. You can't click on that, it's just a picture. And let's change this to circles and arcs. So if we have a look at our geometry methods, we've got a circle by or an arc by 3 points, and an arc between lines. I'm just going to use the first method. Click at P1, click at P2, and then you can create an arc. So you'll notice that the first thing that can happen is you can create an arc. Let's do that again. So click there, click there. Now you need to go all the way around, come back to P2, click once, and it creates your circle. So click, click, and click again at P2, and it'll create a circle. Arc by 3 points, P1, P2, and there's my circle by 3 points. So the circle goes between all 3 of those points. I'd like you to go to ovals, the next exercise down, and we're still using our circle tool, only this time we're going to use our oval or our ellipse geometry. So just before you click, let's just make sure we've got the correct layer, ovals. So click once to start and click once more to finish. You'll also notice that we have other options. For example, we have this option, which is, let's click at P1, let's click at P2, and so that was an ellipse by center. And we have the final one. So we click at P1, click at P2, and then the distance between P1 and P2 creates the major axis, and then we can create the minor axis. And then we can move our cursor around and draw either a partial ellipse or a full ellipse. If I have a series of lines and I go back to my circle tool, there is an option for us to create a circle from these lines. So click on that point, click on that one, click on that one, and ArchiCAD tries to find a circle that fits those 3, and you can see there's a little eyeball on my screen. Which side do we want to place it? Click, and that'll create a circle that touches those 3 lines. When you finish that exercise, let's go to our view map and double click on Splines. This is another exercise. So there's a spline tool which is in More down the bottom here. And don't forget we need to change our layer to splines. So click at P1 to start, click at P2, and you just remember the cursor changes shape as we get near those points. So it's a filled in pencil, double click to finish. And that is a spline, nice curve shape. And you'll notice that my spline goes through those points. You can choose different geometry methods for this. So I'm going to do a different geometry method. And that's more like a polygon. So click and drag, and when I drag, I get this handle that controls my next point. So click and drag, click and drag, click and drag a little bit, double click to finish. So the spline that's got these handles on it, if I use my arrow tool and click on my spline, then I can click on one of these handles. And I have this option here, which is called the pet palette. I can either drag the entire object or I can move the tangent handle. And if I move the tangent handle, you can see I can move that end out, I can move it in, I can rotate it up and down, and that does have an effect on the other adjoining one. And then I can grab hold of that one, and I can move that one around as well. So you've got very fine control over these objects once you've created them. When you finish that exercise, let's go to Polylines, which is the next exercise down. So go to the view map, double click on Polylines, and we're going to use our Polyline tool, which is this one just here, Polyline tool, and don't forget to change our active layer to Polylines. So the polylines can create rectangles, rotated rectangles, and polygons. So click there, click there, and you'll also notice a pet palette has just appeared. This allows us to create curving polygons. So that is a straight line. Then we have an arc which is at a tangent to that line. It turns into another arc which is also at a tangent, comes back, double click, and I finished. So click to start, so it's a straight line, click, and then we could choose to have an arc with a defined tangent, arc by 3 points, arc by center point. So that can be quite a handy tool for creating lines and arcs together. When you finish that exercise, go to your view map, and we're going to look at Reshape. Now we've just looked at the pet palette, and I want to look at this in detail. So if we select an object, first of all, and then if we go to the edge of the fill, So this object is a fill. If I go to the edge, you'll notice that I've now got a pet palette with 2 rows of information. I can drag objects, rotate them, which we'll cover later. Mirror and multiply, will cover all of these later. But here we could reshape and we could add a new vertex or a new node to our object. So we can make it a different shape. We can add a circular vertex. So completely changing the shape of our object. Let's have a look here. We've got this option here, which is the offset edge. So it tries to offset an edge, and it'll offset an edge. In this case, it'll offset an edge until it reaches that circle, until that circle becomes a tangent to that line. So back to our edge. We can extend neighboring edges, and we're going to just finish there. So just have a play with that. You'll notice that we have options. When we go to a corner point, we have options. We're going to cover this one later, but we can offset the entire object, making it bigger. We can offset an edge. We can offset the entire object. So these are tools you'll use for reshaping objects that you've created. When you finish that exercise, let's go to our rotate, and we'll have a look at this object. So click on our object, click on its edge. There's our pet palette. We want rotate, which is on the bottom line. This brings up a protractor. Now the first click will set the origin of the protractor. So I'm going to use that corner. This is going to be my angle to rotate. So I click, and then I can rotate that object using the center of the protractor as the center of my rotation, and I can type in the angle. So for example, 32 degrees. Enter once, and it rotates my object. I'm just going to undo that. Let's do that again. So click, we're going to rotate. So you notice it's already selected rotate. Click, click. This time I'm going to go the other way. But just before I finish, I'm going to hit the Control key just once. And you'll see a plus is turned up next to my cursor. When I click, it duplicates my object. Let's go to our mirror tool. So back to our view. So back to our view map, double click on mirror, and here's our mirror object. So I'm still using my arrow tool, so click on that, click on the edge. We want to mirror, which is this option here, the third option on the bottom line, and it requires a mirror plane. So click once at P1 and once at the bottom of P1, and that creates a mirror plane, so that's mirroring around that plane. Now if you miss the bottom, you'll notice that it mirrors it at an angle. So the mirror plane creates the bisecting angle between these two objects. So it's like putting a mirror down on your plan. Wherever you put your mirror, that's where the other object will end up. If you hit the Control key once, just once, it'll create a duplicate. If you don't want that and you hit it again, it will stop that making a duplicate. So now I've got 2 of those. Back to your view map, double click on trim, exercise number 17. So here, this is an image of what the tool I want you to use is the trim tool, which is just at the top here, trim. So first of all, we need to select the object. So click on that, click on our trim tool, and then we can click on that object to remove it. Click on our trim tool again, and click on that object. Now you can also activate this tool by holding the Control key down. So when I hold down the Control key, it will activate that tool without me having to select anything or do anything. Now you notice I can't delete my fill, but I can delete or trim my lines. When you finish that exercise, double click on split. This is our split tool. So split looks like a axe. Here's our split tool here. So we select our polygon first. It's important. Then we activate our split tool, click at P1, click at P2, and it splits our object. So in this case here, we've got the eyeball, and it wants to know which side to select once you've finished splitting. So move down, click, and there's our split object. If we hit the delete or the backspace key, it will delete the object that is selected. I'll just put that back. When you finish that exercise, double click on adjust. So in this case, we need to select all the horizontal lines, and then we're going to use our adjust tool, which is just up here, adjust, We click on that vertical line, and those 4 lines are dragged across and they line up with that vertical line. The trick was we have to select the objects first. When you finish that, we'll go to exercise 20 on our view map, Fillet and Chamfer. Select your object. There's a fill here. You need to select this fill, and then you need to click once on that black corner. So when you do that, you've got these options. Move node, which will actually move that node around. We've got Fillet and Chamfer. When you do that, you'll see this dialog box. Click OK. This will fill it, so it'll put a curve in. Let's do this other option down the bottom here. So click on that. We want that to chamfer. Click OK. Click here. We're going to make sure we fillet that, and we can apply that to all corners, and the entire object gets these rounded corners. When you finish that exercise, let's go to the exercise 21 on our view map, drag and move. So with drag and move, we've got a rectangle here. If you click on the rectangle and then go Control or Command D if you're on a Macintosh, so Control D on a Windows machine, Command D on a Macintosh, and then we can click to start and we can click to finish, and it'll move that object a relative amount. You don't have to physically touch that object again. Let's just undo that. So if I want to move that object from this corner to that corner, then I can do it. I go Control D, this is where I'm starting, that's where I'm ending, and it drags the object along. Let's do that again. So Control D, click here, and I'm moving along. Now if I hit the Control key again, I'll get my plus, so this will create a copy. So now I've got my 2 objects. Control D, click and move, there's my distance, 100 millimeters, enter, and it's moved that object 100 millimeters. So you can move objects, you can drag objects, and this other programs call this move by points, where you can click at one point, click at another point, and it moves a relative distance. The final exercise we're going to look at is multiply. So we're going to use our mirror tool again. So we're going to use this is our final exercise, the multiply. So we're going to use our arrow tool again. So we've still got the arrow tool. Select our little fill object here. Click again on its edge, and we want to choose the last option on the bottom line, multiply. We want to do a spread. So for example, we're putting in timber flooring. Maybe we're putting in our joists. So our joists are 600 millimeters apart, 2 feet apart. We do not want to pick the path before input. We do not want to rotate. Click OK. We're going to start measuring from this point. So you can choose either point on your object. So if you wanted to finish off with a joist at the end of your building, maybe it's better to start on that point there. And you'll notice that every time it can put another joist in, it will. It won't put one in between. So I've got to go to a nice round number 6 meters before it puts another one in. Click once to finish, and there are my joists, and they're 600 millimeters apart. Now it's not 600 millimeters between the joists, it's 600 millimeters from that right corner to that right corner. Those are the end of your exercises. I suggest you repeat these a few times, and certainly come back to this movie when you're working on your project and you've forgotten how to duplicate your objects, or you've forgotten how to multiply them, or you've forgotten how to trim or reshape objects.